Today, it was after midnight on March the 5th at approximately 1:45 a.m. The Tuscaloosa County Sheriff's Office received a call for a welfare check on an individual in the 1700 block of 47th Avenue Northeast. Deputies responded to the address and were able to locate a female there that had been assaulted and was deceased. It appeared that she had been assaulted and died possibly of blunt force trauma. Of course, the actual cause of death will take some time for that to be determined through the Alabama Department of Forensic Sciences. The victim's children were still home. They were able to report to the deputies that a man with whom she had had a dating relationship in the past had been over earlier, and that they had been in an argument. And based on their information and some other information that we had involving calls at that address, we were able to come up with a suspect. The Violent Crimes Unit was called out to assume the investigation. Our crime scene unit began processing the scene. Violent crimes investigators began canvassing the area. It's quickly determined that the victim's vehicle was missing as well. Several hours later, that vehicle was located, and the suspect was located with the vehicle. He was detained at that time, and after comparing physical evidence on the scene, physical evidence in the vehicle, and physical evidence on the suspect himself, as well as interviewing the witnesses and some extended family members, we did develop probable cause to charge him with the murder of that individual. Her name was Jessica Lynn Andrews. She was 35 years of age. He's been placed into the Tuscaloosa County Jail on capital murder with no bond. The no bond is one of the low bond on capital, and the capital, excuse me, let me back that up. The capital charging enhancement arises from the fact that he had two separate protective orders or pretrial release orders that were applied to him for previous counts of domestic violence against this victim. And one of the statutes of the capital murder enhancement law states that whenever a court has issued a protective order for the victim against the defendant, or the protective order is issued as a condition of the defendant's pretrial release, then they shall be charged with capital murder. And that was the case to be found last night, so that this individual was charged with capital murder and given no bond at this time. He was identified as Jarvos Jermaine Osborne. He's 40 years of age, most recently of Tuscaloosa. He also has an extended criminal history in the area of Harris County in Houston, Texas. Do you have any questions?
Can you explain to us what exactly is a protective order?
So there's several different kinds of protective orders. The one that most people are familiar with is called a protection from abuse order. That is something that a person can petition the circuit court for, and that would be for victims of domestic violence that fall into certain categories, and a judge can issue a temporary, an extended, or a permanent protection from abuse order. In this case, he was subject to orders on pretrial release. So as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Osborne had been charged with multiple counts of criminal domestic violence against this victim in the recent past. When he posted bond, and I believe on another one where he was found guilty and was granted probation as a condition of his release from jail or custody, the court had ordered him no contact with this victim. So those orders also, as I read the law, pretrial release orders, those also applied for this capital murder enhancement on this, since this was the same victim that he did in fact murder last night.
So did they have a PFA, or
no? These were not protection from abuse orders. These were pretrial release orders, and I think he had not. He was one who was on bond. I believe the other one who was on some type of probation, or he may have pled guilty on the one he was on probation. But both of those cases, he just had court orders ordering him to have no contact with the victim. So at least for that level of things, it's very similar, but they're granted in different capacities at different parts of the criminal justice process. But they do apply for this capital murder enhancement as well. Obviously, a judge had ordered him to not have any contact with her in an attempt to protect her.
What was the alleged motive?
that would be something for the investigation to keep working on and present to a grand jury.
Is this woman's residence considered a crime scene?
Yes,
And you said her children were home at the time?
correct. Correct.
Did they witness this homicide?
That is also part of the investigation. They witnessed portions before, during, and after, as to whether or not they are legally witnessed the actual event in its entirety. That would be something for the investigation to look at as it goes forward.
How old are they?
They're both under the age of 18.
What happens if someone violates a protective order? What's the next step?
Generally, like I said, this was not a protective order here, but generally on a protective order, if that is done in the presence of law enforcement, or if law enforcement responds to a call and has probable cause to believe that that's been done, and can locate the individual, they have the option of arresting them on site there as a domestic violence crime. If that is not the case, then a victim can come swear a warrant on that individual as well for violating a protected from abuse order.
So the charges, I know you said he's facing some charges in Houston, in Harris County.
No, he's had an extensive
Okay.
criminal history in Harris County, in Houston as well.
So this doesn't have anything to do,
No,
you know, the
no.
charges here.
No, but he did have several counts of violating protection orders in Houston, as well as terrorist threats against family members, which is not a law that directly coincides with what we have here, but it sounds like some type of domestic violence to me.
Now, were those cases closed out already? Had he already?
I don't know the status of the cases in Texas.
You talked about the welfare check. Did this happen last night, or has she been deceased? for a
No,
while?
it happened very shortly after that. Yeah, the welfare check was the result of some family members being called or being contacted right after this event happened and asking law enforcement to go check on her. So
I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to reiterate because I just want to make sure that I understand it.
Yes,
because
yes.
At the moment, I don't.
right.
Did the victim have a protective order?
Not a protection from abuse order. That is a completely separate process that is done through circuit court. This individual had been convicted or was on bond for criminal offenses of domestic violence. Okay? All right, he'd been arrested for, like, I'd have to look it up, I believe, assault and harassment. As a condition of his bond to get out of jail on one of those, a judge had issued an order that he was to have no contact with her. All right, so does that make sense? So it's sort of kind of has the same effect, but it is not a protection from abuse order. It was issued through district court as part of his criminal case. And there were two of those from two prior domestic violence criminal cases.
With that victim?
With the same victim, right. So they weren't protection from abuse orders, but they were still the capital murder law, in addition to mentioning protective court orders, mentions pretrial release conditions, which these were in both ways. So these absolutely would apply for the capital murder enhancement the same as a PFA, and therefore he was charged with capital murder.
I guess just talk about the difficulty of knowing that the victim had some sort of order, or there was a court mandate that he was not supposed to have contact with the victim.
Correct.
And unfortunately, she passed. I mean, there's nothing that police can do in that situation, but just talk about, I guess, the difficulty of knowing that, you know, it's hard to make sure that people can protect themselves in this situation.
Right. Well, you know, I don't want to start getting into any type of practice of looking into people's personal lives. I do know that I think without fail that every time that the sheriff's office responded there, between this couple, a report was made. On 2 or 3 separate occasions, they physically, criminally arrested him for charges of domestic violence, which ended up resulting in his ongoing court cases and these protective orders or pretrial release orders that were doing this. So, you know, that everything that you know could be done at that time was being done, as far as we know. Now, what was going on in their personal lives, I can't speak to.
So
Yeah.
she never filed for a protective order against him. This all came about because of you guys going out and arresting him, and this was part of.
Yes. Now she may have. I haven't researched that. I haven't had to research today. But the orders that we use as the basis for the capital murder complaint were not protection from abuse orders. They were from the pre-existing arrest, right? Which is still a protective order. You know, right? I mean, it's still the same thing basically, just a different process in a different court. So.
Were these her children that were in the house?
Yes, they were not his though, but they were hers.
Okay. Is this number 4 for Tuscaloosa County so far this year?
I believe so. I'd have to look that up.
So with this, is there a message that the sheriff's office wants to get out to domestic violence victims?
Yeah, we domestic violence is a huge part of what all our local law enforcement deals with every day. We have very stringent laws in the state of Alabama that require all investigative reports to be written on every call. I know that every agency has specialized domestic violence investigators. I know the district attorney's office has specialized victim service officers. All their jobs are to follow up with every victim of domestic violence. We have nonprofit organizations, including Turning Point, in our community to provide services to domestic violence victims. Anyone who feels that they're in a situation where they need law enforcement assistance, you are to call us, and we are going to come and provide every type of assistance that we can. And I don't see anything in what I've seen so far that doesn't show that to be the case. Like I said, in this case, he was actually arrested by deputies most of the times that they responded out there on calls. So
Who made the calls? Was it?
I'd have to look up each individual case to see. But when they responded on scene, they investigated. Like you said, for most misdemeanors in Alabama, it has to occur in someone, including law enforcement officers' presence, to make an arrest. Domestic violence is one of those exceptions. And if investigating officers can determine probable cause on site, we can arrest without a warrant, and that was done in multiple times in these cases.
Was that done in this case?
Yes. In this victim's, in multiple of this victim's cases, we arrested Mr. Osborne for domestic violence, responding to their house.
And that's how he got the pretrial.
Yes, that's how he got his criminal charges. Yes.
Was the vehicle found within the city of Tuscaloosa?
This all occurred in the Holt community, which is outside of the city limits.
How far away from the crime scene was it found?
It wasn't terribly far away.
1 mile?
I'm not going to be at liberty to discuss that. So.
How did you all find the vehicle?
We were looking for it in earnest, whenever the violent crimes unit responds to a crime of this magnitude, we call out all resources, regardless of jurisdiction. We very easily had 30 investigators between us, crime scene personnel, the United States Marshals Task Force, and other units between Tuscaloosa Police and Tuscaloosa County Sheriff's Office out last night. And that's, we found the vehicle. We found it, so that's what we do.
Once on the scene, would you say you found it within 2 hours, 3 hours?
I'm not sure exactly. It may have been 3 to 4 hours. I'm not sure.
Okay.
It was while we were still investigating the crime scene. So from the time of the call, the deputies arriving on scene, our dedicated crime scene unit was out there working on the crime scene. We located the suspect and all that within the same 2 to 3 to 4 hours and had him in custody.
And I guess just talk about the children in the home potentially witnessing their mother's last moments kind of in this way. What's your reaction to that?
Right. Yeah, it's very tragic. We contacted DHR, Alabama Department of Human Resources. They came out and worked alongside with us to have the children turned over to appropriate family members, and I'm sure that they'll be working alongside the families to get them some services that they need as well.
What was the suspect doing in the vehicle when you found it?
I'm not going to discuss that pending the grand jury presentation and all that. So.
Are there any other charges that he could face?
Yes, there's absolutely a chance. Like I said, this is just the initial arrest. There are other charges that he could face. As his investigation goes forward, capital murder doesn't have the ability for a bond to be applied. So, in all likelihood, any additional charges would be done with consultation with the district attorney's office upon presentation of grand jury.
And without being too gruesome, do you know? Well, the method of or the way that she was killed.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into any specifics on that, but it was, again, this is all pending the formal autopsy results. But a firearm or a knife was not used. So. All right. Yes, sir.
Excuse me. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
That's okay.
Captain. Can I have a word with you?
Yeah.
This is not on camera.